All right, guys, welcome to another episode of CUDA Education. Today, what I want to go over is a little bit more detail in this shadows application, right? So we have our shadows application here, where basically you have a light source, you have an object, and you have a shadow cast based on where the light source is. And of course, we have our camera, right? Which is allows us to see all that's going on here. All right. So light source, object, shadow, camera, and of course a platform for us to see the shadow on. All right. For this application, we have a total of 4 shaders. We have a ray generation shader, right? That deals with um, generating rays into the scene. So we have a ray generation shader that deals with generating rays into the scene. We have a miss shader, which is all this blue space right here. So anything that traverses the scene and misses, we get a um, we get a sky model or a background color. Okay, so that's our miss shader, right? Even underneath we get misses, right? So we have again ray gen shader that generates rays into the scene. We have our miss shader that gives our background color, because not the generated ray didn't hit anything in the scene. So as far as everyone is concerned, that is a total miss, right? So that's our sky model, our background color. Okay. Then we have our hit shader that basically a ray traverses the scene and it hits something. It hits an object, it hits the platform, something is hit. Okay. So we have ray gen, miss, and the hit shader, what they call the closest hit here. Okay. And then we also have a shadow shader. And the shadow shader is basically what helps us to get um, the shadows that we see here. So we could see our shadow, right? So as the light goes here, the shadow shows here. As the light goes on this side, as you can see, this becomes more illuminated, the shadow goes over here. It makes sense, right? So we have our shadow shader that allows us to see all of the shadow here, right? Okay. So I just want to make this very quick as possible, and sort of get through what we need to get through, right? So this shadow shader is normally not part of the ray tracing examples. Normally we just have the hit, miss, and the ray gen shader, right? So we have this shadow shader, right? And that's kind of what I'm gonna discuss a little bit. All right. I'm going to do a whiteboard edition of this example, just to repeat and clarify a lot of what we're dealing with here. All right. So what I want to talk about now is the order of operations of what intellectually is going on here. All right. So let's just maximize the application, right? So I'm running at, see, I got a super fast GPU, the RTX 4050 laptop GPU. All right. All right. So let's intellectually go through what's happening here. A primary ray is generated into the scene, right? A primary ray is generated into the scene. Um, and the primary ray either misses completely and we get our miss shader, or it hits something, right? It hits an object. Okay, so it could hit the platform, it could hit this object here. Um, and all of and once it hits the object, once the primary ray hits the object, a second ray is generated towards the light source. Okay, so we have our primary ray coming into the scene, and then a second ray that's generated at the point of hit that goes towards the light source. Now, in our application, the light source is the position of the light source is changing. It's circling around the application, which is why we see the shadow moving, right? Makes sense. So, primary ray generated into the scene, it hits something, and then at the point of hit, a second ray is generated, and it goes towards the direction of the light source. Why is there a second ray generated, and why is it going towards the light source? Well, it's simple. When we hit, let's talk about, let's say over here now. So the primary ray hits here, right? So it hits here. I'm gonna make the light cycle around to where it was before. So the primary ray hits here, and then as it hits here, it goes towards the light source. So the light source right now is over here, right? I have to keep making it, waiting for it to cycle, but the light source is over here. So when the primary ray hits here, and the primary ray is generated from the camera, aka your computer monitor, aka your eyes, right? So the primary ray is what we see. That's what's generated from the camera to the object. So I'm going to wait for the light to cycle around. So when it hits the object, another ray is generated towards the light source. Right now the light source is right here, right? So it generated towards the light source. And why is that second ray generated? That second ray, it's called, I guess we just call it the shadow ray. It's generated because we have to test for whether this point that is now lit is a shadow or a lit point. It will be a shadow or it will be a lit point. Let's start with a lit point. So a ray comes in, it hits here, and then another shadow ray goes towards that. It's going to be a lit point because there is no interruption. There's no other hit or intersection between the point of hit, and the light source. So we know that this piece right here, generally speaking, is when the light is over here, generally speaking, it's going to be illuminated. It's going to be illuminated because there's no interruption between the point of hit and the light source. So we know that's an illuminated section. Right now, we could kind of get a little technical, but I don't want to confuse you right now. So we deem that, so basically what the shadow ray is going to say is like, listen, we had a hit. It's like you're going into space. We had a hit, and we tested the location of the hit to see if there's any intersection between that hit point and the light source. Now remember, the light source is not the camera. The light source is not the camera. The light source is not the camera. The camera is what generates the primary ray. The light source is a different entity. Now, the camera and the light source could be in the same location. Yes, that is correct. It could be. But, I mean, as you can see here, the light source is not always in the same position as the camera. Okay? So, we launched a primary ray into the scene. We recorded where the hit point was. We generated a second shadow ray to test from the hit point to the light source if there was any interruptions or intersections or not. If there are no intersections, then we turn off the shadow shader. We turn off shadowing. We turn off the shade. Okay? So we're going to turn off the shade because there's nothing interrupting that point and between the point and the light source. So obviously it's not a shadow. A shadow by definition, it's 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 a shadow of an object that was hit, by a light source, and you're now casting a shadow behind it. Okay. So the point is considered non-shadowed. Okay. So basically we non-shadow this point and we leave it alone. Right? It's non-shadowed and we leave it alone because between the point and the light source there are no interruptions, no intersections, anything. Now let us consider the case where we do get a shadow. So I'm gonna pick this part right here. So let's pick this part right here, like when it's casting the shadow here, okay? Where you have the hammer, okay? All right. So we have a primary ray. We generate the primary ray into the scene, right? This is what we are seeing here. This is what we are seeing here from our perspective, right? This is what we are seeing here from our perspective. So we generate rays into a scene, okay? Now, we have a hit right here. We have a hit right here. And we said, hey, we have an intersection. Let us test to see if it's a shadow. Now, I gotta wait for the light source to cycle around. So now when we have a hit here and we generate the shadow ray, the shadow ray is gonna go from this point where we had the shadow. I'll wait for it to cycle around just for you so you guys can follow. So at this point where we had the shadow, we register a hit and then we're going to go to the light source. The problem is now we do have an intersection. What is the intersection? The intersection is the hammer, right? And I know that because the shadow being cast is in the shape of the hammer, right? So we have an intersection here between the light source and the point of intersection. And what is the intersection? What is the disruption? What is coming between the light source and that point in space? It's the hammer. And because we have that intersection, because we have that disruption, because there's something between the light source and that point, we deem this pixel, this position in time, this region to be shadowed. So we have non-shadowed regions and we have shadowed regions, and that's all it is. So everything we see here, all this this shadow moving around, it's basically, we're constantly testing these regions to see whether there is an intersection between the hit point and the light source. So obviously our light source is moving around, right? It's circling around the object, so the shadow is being, all of these regions are always being tested. So right now we have labeled shadow, 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 non-shadow, 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 because there is no disruption between here and the light source, right? Wherever the light source is. There's no disruption, no disruption, no disruption, no disruption, no disruption, 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 no disruption, right? And that's all it is. That is all this application. In the simplest terms, you are shooting rays into a scene from the camera. So rays come into the scene from the camera. We hit something here. We hit the platform. So we hit the platform. We're not hitting the hammer. We're not hitting the object in the center. We're hitting the platform. And we say, okay, let us test this point in space right here. When we shoot the ray from that point to the light source, when the light source is over here, we cast a shadow. If the light source is somewhere else, if it's somewhere else, we don't cast a shadow, and therefore we don't get this darkened space. Okay? So that is basically what this application is. I don't really want to get into the programmatic side of it too much right now, but that is basically why we have this fourth shader because it has to toggle between shadow and non-shadow. All right, it has to toggle between shadow and non-shadow. Now this is not a miss or a hit, okay? These shadow things is not a miss or a hit. It's a totally different conversation. We're not talking about missing where a ray traverses a scene and it doesn't hit anything. We're not talking about that because we have hit the platform, right? So we have hit the platform, or we have hit the shoulder here, or whatever. We have hit the object, right? Or we have hit the platform. Okay, we're not talking about hit. I mean, we're not talking about miss. We're not talking about the sky model. That's a different conversation. Okay, we're not even necessarily talking about so right, we're not talking about that miss. We're talking about the miss. We're talking about the shadow of, okay, is there a disruption between that point in space and the vector or the ray or the line, the shadow ray going to the light source, right? So it's two different misses. So we have two misses. We have the shadow miss and the regular standard issue everyday miss, right? And then we have our natural, we have our natural we have our natural you know ray generation, which generates rays, and we have our natural hit shader, which we know all too well at this point, right? If you're not familiar with all this stuff, just backtrack on the old videos. You know, I build up different conversations. There was a point where I didn't understand all this stuff myself, and I'm learning, and as I learn, you guys learn, right? We even get to do shadows for bunny ears, okay? So um that's that. I don't really want to get too much deep into it. Just know that right, we have ray generation, and primary rays is different from the shadow ray. So rays are generated in the scene from the camera. This is why when I turn the object, that everything remains consistent. So whether I go here or here, the shadow stuff doesn't change, right? Or whatever, like, because we're generating rays from the camera. So the only thing that's being rendered is what the camera can see, right? If the camera can't see it, it doesn't really exist there, right? So there is ray generation from the camera, right? And then the shadow ray is dealing with the light source. And as you can see, the light source is spinning. So the light source is spinning, and um, we have our shadow that's built as a result. Actually, guys, this application is pretty cool. Coming into this, I wasn't really sure how all this was created, but after investigation, um, you learn stuff. So this is a pretty cool application, rather simple. Um, and that's pretty much it. We could zoom in and out. It doesn't really affect anything. Um, Maybe the last thing I want to say is that you notice that as the light source moves, that the object itself gets lighter or darker, right? So like the shoulder is light now, and then it slowly gets darker because the light source is moving. This doesn't really count. This doesn't count as shadow stuff. This is just the light source is illuminating a certain part of the object, and it's not illuminating a certain part of the object. One of the coolest things to notice, though, is that even in these little ridges here, you could see, like in this ridge right here, you could see where even here you get a little shadow. You see what I'm saying? And that's like very cool and realistic, guys. That's like amazingly cool. Now, yeah. Right? So this is like some real computer graphic stuff right here. You see? So all of this is always being tested. The whole thing is being tested, right? And like, yeah, you can see the shadow like recede. and then it comes back into vogue. You see what I'm saying? So this is really cool, and all it is and the thing about it too is that it is, this is not artificially created stuff. Like in the olden days, when we didn't have all this ability to process rays and do all this these thousands of calculations and stuff, um, you had to artificially make these shadows. But this is like real time ray traced stuff. This is not pre-rendered or artificially created or artificially or pre-arranged or anything. This is just naturally, if the light is there and the shadow test is done, if there's no shadow, we show the object, and if there's a shadow, we show the shadow, right? And you could see that it goes around, around, around. So it's pretty cool. One of the things that I'm also a little bit surprised about is that, like, even for a simple application like this, I don't know if it's because it's a ray tracing stuff, but even for a simple application like this, every time I run a ray tracing example, now I don't even remember about the non-ray traced example because I've been spending so much time with the ray tracing examples, but every time I run a ray tracing example, my laptop fan has to come on, right? Now we do have 1,034 frames per second, which is pretty cool, right? So we're running fast, but I'm always curious as to why the fan has to come on. Like, are we using that much processing power that the computer has to heat up in order to provide cooling for processing all this stuff? Like, is it that serious? So that was a little thing that I'm a little bit. But I guess if you have all these pixels that you have to be testing constantly, we're testing in real time. So every time it spins, we're doing we're testing. I mean, even over here where there's never a shadow, like, you still always have to test whether this pixel or this region is shadowed or not, right? There's no, like, granularity or anything. You know what I mean? There's no on and off switch where you could just randomly turn stuff off just because like, that it's never going to be unshadowed, right? But so this is a cool thing about ray tracing. Like, you're really getting into the nature of stuff, right? And, like, the thing about ray tracing too is that you don't have to do, like, let's say you had a bunch of colors that were, like, combined together, or the light changed color. Like, you don't have to start faking it and figuring out what's gonna happen with like, let's say this was one color and the light source was a different color. You wouldn't have to and then, like, the platform was a different color. You wouldn't necessarily have to figure out what the resulting color would be when you combine all three of them together, or all two of them. Like, you just basically push the rays into the scene, and then whatever happens. You know what I mean? Like, it's not you're not faking anything. This is a real deal Holyfield, as they would say, right? um yeah, I will get into the programmatic stuff a little bit later, but I just want to keep it simple and straightforward. Guys, if you're interested in this stuff, tutorial number one gets you to install the Vulkan API on a Windows-based machine, with a Vulkan-capable GPU. You have to have a Vulkan-capable GPU. You also have to have um, a ray tracing capable GPU. In my case, I have the RTX 4050 GPU. Any of the RTX lines from NVIDIA can run ray tracing, or later, whenever you're seeing this video, RTX or later. I don't know about other vendors, AMD and Intel, but yeah, it's good stuff. If you're artistically inclined, if you're creative, if you want to do 3D modeling, if you want to do 3D assets, all that stuff, I'm more on the programming side. You guys are probably maybe more on the artistic side. So it's definitely something worth doing. You get tutorial number one to install the Vulkan API on your Windows-based machine with a Vulkan-capable GPU. And then you do tutorial number 15, which is going to show you all of Tutorial number 13, actually. Tutorial number 13. That will get you all of the examples running. Tutorial number 13. I apologize. It's tutorial number 13. All right, guys. That is basically all I have today. Um, I would link everything down below. Shout out to the author of the script. It's a very good script. Tutorial number 13 is the all the examples. I keep mixing up 13 and 15 for some reason, but it's 13. Okay. Tutorial number 13 is gives you all the examples. Um, yeah, guys. Really good stuff. Get a group together, work through this stuff, learn this stuff. The world is changing as we know, so we have to prepare. All right. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.